guys, so I'm Aaron,
And I'm Ethan.
and we're going to be talking about tidal wave energy.
So let's get on to it. So first we got to know our region. So our region is going to be the Bay of Fundy in Nova Scotia. So I'm explaining the effects of climate change. So first is climate change is increasing temperatures all over the world, but it's also increasing temperatures in Nova Scotia. So some effects of climate change is a 10% precipitation increase. So there's going to be a lot more rain from all the waters around Nova Scotia, and then more intense storms are occurring to the Bay of Fundy, and the ocean is becoming more acidic in Nova Scotia. And here are some. Here are some. My fault. Here are some photos of it. So on to the next slide.
Yeah.
So, how vulnerable is the Bay of Fundy to climate change? So, as you can see here, first, this is a map, and it shows the rising sea level of Nova Scotia. So here is the Bay of Fundy, and it is in the high part. So it's rising 15. The water's going to be rising 15 meters above sea level. So as you can see, the rising sea levels in the Bay of Fundy can be devastating because it's going to force the people living there to have to evacuate. And also, to make this even worse, the storm surges are increasing. So storm surges is basically like rising sea levels, but it's fast, basically like fast flash floods. And then this is the government role of Nova Scotia. So the way that Nova Scotia is dealing with their climate change is they're going to be working with Indigenous communities and industries because Indigenous people were the first people to walk this land, and they still live here. And then the Canadian government also supports tidal energy and to help it in Nova Scotia. So here, now we have the highlights of the Bay of Fundy. So first, the highlight is obviously the highest tides in the world. As you can see in this photo at the corner, the tides are low, but then they get really high, as you can see. And then obviously it has a really unique ecosystem, with it Nova Scotia having freshwater and saltwater in the same region. And you can see there's diverse wildlife. They have mammals, they have really cool birds like puffins, and obviously the blue whale, which is like a one-of-a-kind thing you get to see. And then the biggest highlight is probably how Nova Scotia has seven UNESCO World Heritage Sites. So the biggest one is called the Joggins Fossil Cliffs. So what are the major industries? What are the major industries in the Bay of Fundy? So as you can see, this graph compares each type of employment. The blue is Nova Scotia, and the star is Canada. So as you can see, the smallest one is utilities, because in the rest of Canada, it's a bigger rate compared to everything else, and Nova Scotia is just a smaller rate. But over here, you could see wholesale, retail, and health and social care. Let's talk about social and health. So because of Nova Scotia and where they are, there's it's not as urban, and it's a lot more rural areas. So there's going to be a lot more chronic diseases, so they're going to have a lot more health care and social care for the people living there. And then for wholesale and retail, there's going to be a lot more stores because it's going to be not as hard to come by because like in Toronto where we are, we can just ship stuff from other places, so we don't need as many retail stores. But in Nova Scotia, they can't really do that because of like the region they're in, so they have a lot more wholesale. And then we have the physical landform, vegetation, climate, and soil regions of Nova Scotia. So first is Nova Scotia is located in the Appalachian Mountains. So as you can see this graph, the red shows how high and elevated it is with the Appalachian Mountains. And it's located in, as you can see, Nova Scotia right there. They're sort of at a lower rate, but they're still in the Appalachian Mountains. So a bit higher. That's why Nova Scotia has the highest tides in the world. And then there's very little coastal areas. I'm surprised by that too in Nova Scotia. And then the vegetation includes forests with boreal and coniferous trees. And the soil regions in Nova Scotia are mostly acidic. So lastly, how much greenhouse gases does Nova Scotia emit? So Nova Scotia is projected to hit 14.4 megatons of greenhouse gases by the end of 2025. And this chart was made in 2020, I'm pretty sure. But as you can see, it's slowly declining. And this chart shows that what is the biggest use of greenhouse gases. So as you can see, in 2025 and throughout 2025 to 2015, over this last decade, electricity generation has been the highest producer of greenhouse gases. This is because there's not that many electricity lines, so a lot of people are using electricity generators based on the area they're in. So, like this is very common in places like Nova Scotia, for example, like Sudbury or regions cut off to mostly rural areas and like big cities. So, what are some relatable things that we can take away from the scores? So we can see that Nova Scotia has one of the dirtiest coal burners in the entire world. So this is because of the climate change is happening because of this. It's because we're burning the fossil fuels and making combustion. And other human activities also can contribute to the climate change. For example, with tourism, because Nova Scotia has 7 UNESCO World Heritage Sites in the world. So humans can when they come here for tourists will probably use electricity generators, which also contribute to these greenhouse gases. And now,
All right, so yeah. So as you said, the largest greenhouse gas emission is from electricity generation because there's not that many people that have that much access, so they use generators that they have, and that produces a lot of greenhouse gas. So it'll help with thousands of tons of greenhouse gases over time. So as we use this renewable energy more and more, it'll help reduce the amount of greenhouse gases being used, and it'll make electricity more accessible to everybody. So it's also extremely predictable because it happens every 24 hours. The moon controls the tide, so you'll always know when the tide's going to rise and when it's going to fall. So that's an extremely good and a predictable source of energy. And yeah, like I said, it's just a great way to get rid of greenhouse gases. So how does tidal energy work? So it uses the rise and fall of tides in order to get kinetic energy, which is turned into electricity. And there's many different types of tidal energy. There's actually 3 main ones, and I'll get into that later. But basically, it just uses the rise and fall of tides, and it can either block it at a high tide and then let it go down so that it can have like more force going in and under, so I can spin a turbine. But usually, it just water uses kinetic energy to spin a turbine when the tides move. So that's basically all it is. So the 3 main types of tidal wave energy. The first one you can see there, tidal stream energy. It basically just uses the current of any strong ocean currents with the tide, and it'll just be placed underwater. And yeah, that's pretty much it. It's pretty simple. The next one is tidal barrages. It's where you place a dam and then you wait for the tide to get high over there. And then as it gets high, you block it off so that no water can go through. And then you wait for the tide to get lower. And then you let all the water come down so that it spins the turbines and it creates a lot of electricity. And the last one is tidal lagoons, which is where people create a man-made lagoon. And they kind of do something very similar to the barrage where they just block it off and they create a turbine, except it's usually much longer, which is for the lagoon, and it can create, I think, a little bit more electricity compared to the barrages. But overall, I looked it up, and the best one seems to be the tidal stream because it doesn't affect the wildlife inside the ocean very much, and it's one of the more efficient ones. So I think that's the best one. How will it be implemented? So Nova Scotia and the Bay of Fundy already has some tidal wave energy things implemented, and so they already have some there, but it's expected to be much larger scale in the next 5 years. But what they have right now is kind of testing stuff, so it's not being fully implemented and being connected to the power grid, so it could earn just be able to convert all that kinetic energy into electricity. So it's pretty low scale right now, but in the next 5 years, expected in like 2030, it should be a lot better, and there should be a lot more tidal wave energy sources. So hopefully switching the main source of energy to tidal compared to what they're doing now, usually with like coal just to spin the turbines, and it's just not renewable. And ideally, it'll be switched to tidal, which is renewable. So should this region spend tax dollars for this invention? So we think that it should, because there's much more pros than there are cons, and it'll likely greatly multiply the province's GDP. So it's such a great thing, especially in Nova Scotia, because there's such coastal areas, and it could be used like literally all around. And because it's like kind of a small province with not that many people living in it, it'll greatly help the communities as well. And because it'll earn so much more money than it'll cost to actually create, it'll multiply the province's GDP by a lot. And it'll sorry. It'll create lots of jobs and employment. So to actually build all these machines, it'll create lots of employment because, like, so because of all the machines needing to be built, it'll create lots of jobs and employment, especially around the whole province. So it'll increase the overall province's wealth. So because there's so many jobs and so much employment to happen, it'll just like all the money coming in to build that will go to the people. And because like we learned the multiplier effect, it'll just circulate throughout the community likely before it goes out into like another external source. But it'll make the province much more wealthy by, one, there's also taxes being taken from the people, which will go to the government. So it'll make the government and the people more wealthy, and it'll just make the province overall better. So here's some fun facts. The Bay of Fundy's massive tides make it ideal for energy generation. Tides occur twice daily, providing a reliable renewable power source. And the water's high density means that turbines generate more power than wind. And tidal energy produces a very low greenhouse gas emission when operating efficiently. Is it worth it? We think that it is worth it, yes. Tidal wave energy has way more pros than cons, like I said earlier. It's extremely predictable, so yeah, like I said, it happens twice a day. It's always going to happen pretty much that time of day, and you're always going to know when you're going to be able to get energy from it or not. It's extremely renewable and clean, so like there's nothing that has to do with that isn't renewable. It's just the tide, which is done just by nature. And there's a lot of reduction in the use of fossil fuels. So if this happens and it's large scale, expected by like 2030, then this will be able to like greatly reduce the amount of fossil fuels being used, and it'll enable it to become just a much more like just the main source of energy. Because right now people are just using coal, and that's not renewable, and it's like creating a lot of greenhouse gas emissions. And last, it's earning Nova Scotia's people and the government tons of money. So this is like probably one of the best things, because it'll just make Nova Scotia a better province in general. So because it's going to earn the people so much more money with all the employment and, like I said, the multiplier effect, it'll keep that money circulated, and it'll be able to like just make it a better province in general, because it's also going to be going to the government. So it'll just make it a wealthier and just a more sustainable province. So yeah, that's it. We thank you guys for listening again. I hope you guys have the same push as us to increase the amount of tidal wave energy inside Nova Scotia, and hopefully that happens in the next 5 years. And yeah, we thank you for listening.
Thank you.